Everyone loves a good scare, but sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that are true. Tonight we're diving into 3 horrifying tales that are not works of fiction, but real experiences. So turn off the lights, grab a blanket, and make sure to check over your shoulder, because these stories might just keep you up at night. It was 2013, and a young woman named Rachel had just moved into a new apartment by herself. She was fresh out of college, newly independent, and excited to finally have her own place. It was a small, one-bedroom unit on the second floor of an old, somewhat run-down building in a quiet neighborhood. The rent was cheap, which was perfect for her. At first, everything seemed fine. The apartment wasn't much, but it was cozy. She spent her first few nights happily organizing her new space. But soon, things began to take a darker turn. One night, as Rachel sat on her couch watching TV, she got the eerie feeling that someone was watching her. You know that unsettling sensation, as if eyes are locked onto you, but no one's there? Rachel brushed it off at first, convincing herself that it was just her imagination. But the feeling persisted. A few days passed, and that feeling grew stronger. One night, while she was in her bedroom getting ready for bed, she caught a glimpse of something in her peripheral vision. She froze. There was a figure, a dark shadow standing outside her window. Rachel lived on the second floor. There shouldn't have been anyone out there. Terrified, she rushed to the window to get a better look, but the shadowy figure was gone. Heart racing, she locked all the windows and pulled the curtains tightly shut. But despite the locked windows, despite the curtains, that feeling of being watched never left her. A few nights later, she was woken up by a strange noise. It was a tapping sound, faint but unmistakable. It was coming from the window. Her stomach dropped. She sat up in bed, holding her breath, hoping it was just the wind. But then she heard it again, more insistent this time. Rachel mustered the courage to peek through a small gap in the curtains. There, standing outside her window, was the same shadowy figure, closer this time, its face pressed up against the glass. Rachel screamed and ran out of her apartment, her heart pounding as she called the police from the hallway. When the officers arrived, they found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, nothing to suggest that anyone had been there. But Rachel knew what she saw. She didn't stay in that apartment much longer. To this day, she refuses to live in any building with windows that face the street. Our second story takes us to a remote farm in rural Wisconsin. The farmhouse had been in the Wilson family for generations, passed down from father to son along with the land. But the locals whispered about the house. They said it was cursed, that strange things had happened there for decades. The Wilsons, however, paid no attention to the rumors. At least not until one winter when the haunting began. In 1998, George and Martha Wilson moved into the house after George's father passed away. It wasn't long before they started experiencing strange things. It began small, lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, cold spots in certain parts of the house. At first, they chalked it up to the age of the house, but one evening, everything changed. Martha was upstairs folding laundry when she heard the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. Heavy, deliberate steps, like someone walking slowly toward her. She called out for George, but there was no response. The footsteps stopped just outside the bedroom door. Martha stood frozen, the hairs on the back of her neck standing on end. She waited for what felt like hours, but no one entered the room. When she finally mustered the courage to look out into the hallway, it was empty. As the weeks passed, the activity intensified. George would come home from the fields to find furniture moved, cabinets open, and strange symbols scratched into the walls. They'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone whispering, yet no one was there. One night they heard what sounded like a loud crash coming from downstairs. They rushed to the kitchen and found all the cabinets and drawers flung open, dishes shattered on the floor. But that wasn't the worst of it. On the wall, written in what looked like blood, were the words, "Get out." Terrified, George and Martha left the house and moved in with relatives. They never returned to the farmhouse. It was abandoned, left to rot in the fields. To this day, locals say you can still see lights flickering in the windows at night, and if you listen closely, you can hear whispers on the wind, warning you to stay away. Our final story comes from a small-town hospital in Texas. It was 2007, and a nurse named Sarah had just started her night shift. She worked the late shift in the older wing of the hospital, a section that was only partially in use, with many rooms left empty. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that puts you on edge. Around midnight, Sarah was doing her rounds when she noticed something strange. One of the empty rooms had its light on. It was room 409. She knew it was empty because it had been out of use for months, and the door was always kept locked. Curious, she went to check it out. The door was unlocked. Slowly, she pushed it open, and what she saw chilled her to the bone. There was a man sitting in the corner of the room, his back facing her. He was dressed in a hospital gown, his head slightly drooped forward as though he was asleep. Sarah's first thought was that someone had mistakenly placed a patient in the unused room. She cleared her throat and asked, "Sir, are you lost?" There was no response. She took a step closer and repeated her question. Still nothing. As she was about to approach him, a colleague appeared in the doorway behind her. "What are you doing in there?" her colleague asked, her voice confused and somewhat alarmed. Sarah gestured toward the man in the corner. "I was just checking on this patient. Do you know why he's in here?" Her colleague stared at her, wide-eyed, and whispered, "Sarah, that room's been empty for months." When Sarah turned around, the man was gone. The chair where he had been sitting was now completely empty. Shaken, Sarah and her colleague quickly left the room. But it wasn't long before other nurses started reporting similar sightings. Patients would complain of seeing a man in a hospital gown standing at the foot of their bed at night, only for him to disappear moments later. Others claimed they heard soft humming coming from room 409, despite it being unoccupied. No one ever figured out who or what the man was. Some say he was the spirit of a former patient who died in that room years ago. Others think it was something far more sinister. And that concludes our journey into the unknown. These are just a few of the many terrifying tales that remind us the world is full of mysteries we may never fully understand. So, the next time you feel like someone's watching you from the shadows, or you hear a strange noise in the dead of night, remember, it could be more than just your imagination. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next dive into the macabre. Sleep well if you can.